and daughter have been on with Broadreach.
Yeah, so my name is Michelle. I'm in Montreal, Canada. So my kids started at Broadreach in 2015. They went the same year, both of them, to the same trip because there were two boats. So they were on different boats, but they both did what is now called the Windward sailing trip, which goes to the Windward Islands in St. Lucia. At the time, it was called the Grenadines Voyage. So they've both done that. They've both been to Bali. One of them did the Master Diver program in the Leeward Islands. One of them did the DIP, which is the Dive Master and Internship program. One of them is on staff now for a second time at Broadreach. And the other one, in addition, has also done marine bio in the Leeward Islands, and this year is going to Egypt to do the Red Sea. So I don't know, I think that's like 9. If I include this summer, that's like 10 Broadreach things so far. I had to write them down because I'd lost track.
I think that's it. From my memory, that's the complete list. Thank you.
Yeah.
Tom, quick introduction and what programs your daughter has been on and where she's heading this summer.
We are here in Shrewsbury, New Jersey, which is right by the shore. My daughter is originally on the dive sailing trip 2 years ago. And last year she was due to go to Curacao, but that had to be put off. She'll be staying at the Marine Biology Station at Curacao for 5 weeks, I think. I know it's a long time she's away from us. And then in the fall, she's going to be entering college to study marine biology.
Fantastic. Charlene, how about you?
Well, I don't have as many trips as Michelle, but Perian did the Caribbean, the St. Martin trip in 2017. In 2018, she did Cancun. In 2019, she got her certification in her rescue certification in Bonaire. And this year she will get her instructor in the Caribbean.
Fantastic. Okay. And so we had a quick question or some things coming through here for the chat. Virginia's going to be monitoring that just for all of our people out there watching at home. We've got some questions here, but we will have some time for some questions from everybody else out there. But Virginia is keeping an eye on everything. So keep firing away with stuff over there. All right. So we'll start with Tom. What are your criteria when you're looking for a summer experience for Sophie?
For me, that was fairly easy because Sophie really drove that. She wanted to do something that was related to marine biology. I am a certified scuba diver and a rescue diver, and she wanted to have certification as well. And I wanted a built-in buddy. So when Sophie and I began looking, we found Broadreach. We researched the different trips that you have, the different levels of trips. And it seemed like a perfect match. It was very well designed. It was very well staffed, and it gave us a very safe feeling. And from the moment she signed up, the contacts were terrific. The support was excellent. And when she left on her trip, I was not nervous at all as she boarded the plane and left us. And when she came back, I don't think she stopped talking about it yet.
Well, that's great. I feel like you've answered a few questions in one, so thank you so much. That was pretty comprehensive. Michelle, same to you. When, back before you even decided on Broadreach, what were those criteria you were looking at for a summer experience for Amelie and Elliot?
Yeah, so what's very common up here, of course, in Canada is we go to canoe tripping camps as opposed to scuba diving camps. And that's what I did when I was young, and I worked at a camp like that. So I wanted my kids to be outside. We told them, spend as many summers outside as you can, because once you stop being outside, you have to work, you're stuck inside. So we wanted something outside. We wanted something unplugged. You'd be surprised, but canoe tripping and living on a boat are actually very, very similar in terms of, we would get food drops. You would go to an island once a week, the limited cooking abilities, the limited food, all of that stuff. So that was really important for us. And also what I really, really appreciated when I saw the forms was the emphasis not only on the child's physical health for the medical questionnaire, but also their emotional health and where they were. and that you paid a lot of attention to that. And for me, that was very reassuring, knowing that you were looking at the child and the other kids as well, holistically when it came to the camp. So really for us, it's all about being outside and unplugged. And we actually chose Broadreach 4 years before sending the kids because they were too young.
Well, that's good. I'm glad they were playing the long game, and as were you. So that we're very grateful. Charlene, how about you for Perry Ann? What were the criteria for a summer experience, especially internationally?
I was really nervous, I'll admit it. She found it. She had a ninth grade biology teacher that really spurred her interest in marine, particularly, and she's always loved the water. So she found Broadreach, and it was probably a year or so before we actually signed up. I mean, let's face it, it's not cheap, but it is definitely the value is there, and especially since she wants to make a career out of it, you can get college credit for it. You get what am I looking for? The service hours or whatever. So a lot like Tom's daughter, Sophie.
Fantastic. And so, Tom, I'll come back to you. What would you say was that sort of one thing that pushed you and Sophie to choose Broadreach as opposed to those other programs out there?
The depth and breadth of the program, that she would go and have an experience where it would not just be a frill, fun, let's go cruise in the Caribbean. She would learn, she would grow, she would have to adapt to living with a group of other students her age. And she'd have to experience what it's like to live on a boat. When you're sailing, crewing, cooking, it's not just let's hop in the water and go see the nice reefs. And I think the life experience and her sharing with the other sailor, the other crew with her was terrific.
How about you, Michelle? What was that one thing that kind of said, okay, Broadreach is the one, maybe versus some of those others that are out there?
Well, it was very similar to Tom's because we were hesitating between Broadreach and another similar organization. And I found the depth of the various trips that you had, and you just Broadreach seemed to be a notch ahead, seemed to be a little bit better organized, seemed to be a slightly bigger organization, and slightly more mature staff. There seemed to be a lot of qualified people working at Broadreach, a lot of professors, a lot of master's students. The fact that you call the campers students, it may seem silly, but you realize that their kids are in a learning environment. And so all of those little things together, but I think exactly as Tom said, it was the depth and the breadth of what you offered. It really gave a lot of credibility and made us feel good about them going there.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, that does mean a lot to us. We are very cognizant of calling our students, right? We are always trying to focus on that learning aspect of things. So I'm glad that that stood out. Charlene, what was the aha light bulb moment for you?
I think just what the two panelists have said, it's so organized. The staff is just so well trained. I mean, Perry got sick in Mexico, got dehydrated. I had to go to the hospital, get a drip, and and then on a Bonaire trip, she couldn't get her flight out that day because you can't get anywhere from Jackson, Mississippi. So she had to go the next day. So a staffer had to stay over and wait on her in Curacao, and it seemed like a debacle, but y'all made it all so smooth. And
oh, thank you. And we're so glad that Perry Ann's coming back with us this summer. So I'll stick with you, Charlene. You mentioned that you were nervous before our trip departure, or rather Perry Ann's trip departure. So let's talk about that pre-departure process a little bit. So once you put in the application to the point where you put Perry Ann on that plane, what did that pre-departure process feel like for you?
It was smooth. I mean, the portal is easy to use. It's just boom, boom, boom. You give the date that stuff is due, whether it's the medical papers you need sign off or the checklist is there. I mean, everything that she needed really was on that list.
Great. Tom, pre-departure process for you? How did it feel?
Couldn't have been easier. There was a complete list that, as Charlene said, you just basically work your way down the list, making sure you completed all the different aspects of it. Probably the slowest part was going out and finding the occasional thing, the Reef Safe shampoo, the Reef Safe products, so that they'd have the right things with them. And probably my wife's biggest concern was, what, no laundry? So, those were a lot. And when she came back, she had a different view of how responsible she needs to be. So this time in the checklist, she's the one who's working it down. So it was a learning step, which was great.
Yeah, that certainly is part of what we try to do by sending that portal login information both to parents and to students. We want those students to take as much ownership over that process as possible. So that really is an important distinction. Michelle, I know you've seen the pre-departure process a lot, and I'm sure it's evolved over the years between everything that Amelie and Elliot went through. But what was it like back in the day, even to now? How has it changed, evolved, and what has that experience been like?
Well, even although the website, the interface is different, the information was there. It was there. All the same information was there at the beginning. So it hasn't really changed a lot. Our one thing I really appreciated was in the list of things to bring, every once in a while there was a brand, if it was, say, a lightweight sleeping bag, and then in brackets, it was like, for example, the whatever it was called, Eleuthera or something by North Face. And so that was pretty good. And we're very fortunate that we live near a co-op called Mountain Equipment Co-op that caters to outdoors. So that shampoo that Tom was looking for, we had it. It was easy to get. The big water bottles in it. And I saw a lot of comments on Instagram about kids saying, what would you bring? Oh, a good quality water bottle. Well, we just bought the ones that you guys had recommended, so that made it really, really easy. Our biggest challenge the first year, because Emily had just turned 16 and Elliot was only 14. He wasn't quite 15 because they're really close in age, but in the summer they're like different ages. Mm-hmm. They couldn't travel through the US because Elliot was only 14 and they were unaccompanied. He was an unaccompanied minor. So we had to figure out how to get him to St. Lucia without going through the US. And so that was the most stressful part, really. And this basically all we said was, look, we're just going to have to pay more to get them there by avoiding the US. So that was the biggest difficulty for us. And then just a really small anecdote with respect to travel. I guess I had to write it down because I lost track. So 2 years later, Elliot was going to Bali. And he was arriving late on the trip because he was finishing school. So he actually went straight from his last high school exam. My husband picked him up. He changed out of his school uniform in the car on his way to the airport. So his bag was already in the car. And we couldn't figure out how to get him to Bali. And it was the travel agents that you guys recommend that found this flight for us, leaving Montreal at 11 in the morning. And he only had one exam and it was at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I said to the woman, I was like, wait a minute, he's got an exam at 8. Mm-hmm. What if he gets to the airport at 9:30, it's leaving at 11. And she was able to reassure us that everything was going to work out. And so that was really great. So travel has been a challenge. But it's always worked out in the end. So I'm hoping that this year the same thing happens because we're having problems with both of their flights.
Well, we can certainly talk about that in more depth after the panel, but I can appreciate the fact that you did have some success with the partners that we use, right? Which is really important, both from an insurance perspective and flight booking process. Also, hopefully being able to talk through a lot of those things here at Broadreach, right? Which are our point of always give us a call. If we don't have the answer, we can find the answer. So that's kind of a big part of our pre-departure process. So I'm glad we were able to get Elliot there. And I'm glad we were able to figure out that minor international. I think I remember that exam and that turnaround quite, quite distinctly. So it all has worked out, which is great. Thankful. Let's move a little bit towards the actual on-program experience, and I'll go to you, Tom. So So Sophie is out there in the Caribbean for her first summer with Broadreach. What are you thinking? What's going through your mind?
I'm hoping she has all the experiences that I did when I learned to dive. I was a little bit older than her, not too much. And I remember the wonder of it and the fact that you all sent us pictures. There was a link we could see as things were progressing through the trip. We knew what the expectation was of the itinerary, where they'd be and what they'd be doing. But the opportunity to actually crew the boat, the opportunity to take care of your dive buddies, to work with everybody. I think, I wasn't worried. The thought that you had, another boat in the area in case something had come up on any of the boats, I was very comfortable with that. And again, I think it was Michelle said, there's a lot of experienced people on your staff, people who obviously have gone through the rigors of their training and have advanced in it. And I wasn't worried. I felt comfortable, and I knew that if something was wrong or she got sick or got a cut or whatever, you all had people available to take care of it. And from all the contacts from when we first put in our application through the moment she got on the plane, I felt there was somebody on the other end to catch her. So we really weren't worried at all.
That's great to hear. And Charlene, I know it sounds like you may have been a little bit worried with Perry Ann in the Yucatan not feeling so well, and of course maybe with some of those flights in Bonaire, but kind of how did you know what was going on, and how did you feel with all those things that were happening?
Well, like Tom said, I mean, y'all keep touch with us, and there's always somebody there. I mean, you've never left me hanging.
Great. And Michelle, I know it's, as far as communication goes, you've had students in all parts of the world, whether it be Bali on the side of a mountain or out on the middle of a boat in the Windward Islands. And how did you feel about communication there, and as far as knowing what went on?
Well, thankfully, we don't worry about our kids too much. And they had been diving for 5 or 6 years before they went on the trip. So they were already advanced divers. So that reassured us, and we knew who had trained them. What we were concerned about was them living on a boat with 15 other people, because on canoe trip, if you need to get a break when you get to the campsite, you just go for a walk, or you take one of the canoes and you go out in the middle of the lake and you get away from everybody. You can't do that on a sailboat. And our kids, I think Elliot was the youngest on his boat and Amity was the youngest on her boat, because we insisted that they be on different boats. I mean, I don't want siblings, being 2 of the 12 people. I thought they probably would have killed each other. They get along really well. So believe it or not, we didn't hear from Elliot once during his Grenadines trip, not once, in 3 weeks. So when he got on the boat and his, I guess, what do you call the response, the woman, Hannah, had said, "So has everybody called home?" And Elliot said, "No, Amity did." So, and sure enough, she called to say, "We're here." And we had already organized with them, "Look, no news is good news. If we don't hear from you, that's fine." And so Amity said, "No, I don't have to call home. My parents said I don't have to call home." And they were like, yeah, you have to call. And so every time it was call home day, we got one call, and it was never from him.
Got it.
So the family, the trip updates, oh my gosh, like my favorite time of the day. And of course I was crazy about following. I had Google Maps out and I was following everywhere they were going. And we would play this game about, okay, who do you think wrote the trip update? And 9 times out of 10, we were right when it was our kids. So that was cool. And we realized actually that Elliot wrote really well. We were like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that he was such a good writer. And so it was fun when the kids mentioned the names of the other kids. And so really that's how we got our news. And our kids were thrilled about being unplugged. And so from that point of view, it was pretty good. And the summer that MED was in Bali. She got sick at one point. She had, digestive issues and had to be put on, I forget what it was, but you guys, I wasn't home, but somebody called my husband and said, look, we have to call, give you an update. And, we weren't worried about it because we knew that it was being taken care of. And same thing with Elliot. When Elliot finally arrived in Bali 2 days after everybody else, we had a hard time. We were in Switzerland anyway. It was a big mess with time zones and stuff like that. So I finally got an email from Broadreach saying he's arrived safe because we just couldn't reach him. But we knew that we could always call headquarters if we had any questions or we had to get any information to the kids. And as I mentioned very early on, some people might have heard, I was scheduled for a really big surgery when Elliot was in Bali that ended up being canceled. But I had already organized with Broadreach that, as soon as everything was okay, we were going to call and they were going to let him know. And, so there was some communication happening there. So it's good to know. And our daughter is going to be working for Broadreach for a second summer this summer. And she was telling me that when she was there, that they spoke as staff, they spoke to headquarters every day. So as a parent, I didn't realize that there was a lot of communication between staff and headquarters. But she said, yeah, we have to call in every single day. So that's really good to know. And I didn't need to know that when I was a parent, except for this Bali trip. So it was just nice to know that if we need anything, somebody can there's always somebody there to answer the call.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, certainly. Now the cat is out of the bag. We do check in with our staff every day. And so sometimes this may be more informal, right? If they're transiting from an island to an island, to say, hey, check in with us. But we have a series of questions that we ask every day to all of those staff members. We want to know how everyone's feeling, how everyone's doing health-wise. We want to understand how, of course, the staff are doing with each other, how everyone's health is. We also want to check in on group dynamics. That's really important to us, make sure everybody's communicating effectively. We understand that our programs are longer, so the groups will go through different phases of development when they just meet each other to when we're getting closer to the end of a program. So that's one of our big questions. And of course, how can we help with logistics? We want to make sure that if there's a big event the next day, that everything's in order. And so just trying to take as much as we can off the plates of our instructors in the field, because they've got a lot going on, taking care of our students and making sure that we can kind of actualize some of those bigger goals that we've got. So yeah, so a little bit behind the scenes, but yeah, those are kind of some of the things that we are asking our staff on a daily basis. And yeah, those trip updates, those are certainly a unique voice of our students. We don't edit them pretty much at all. Of course, we'll take a quick look and just make sure they've included their names and spelled them correctly. But otherwise, yeah, that is them. So hearing from those students almost, yeah, every day is really unique and a great way to let everybody know what's going on. Let's move to post program. So Tom, this one's to you. Now, before Sophie left, it sounded like you had some goals and expectations in terms of what she would learn and certifications that she would come back with. But when she came back, what did you see in Sophie? Had she changed at all?
Well, her hair was 14 shades blonder than when she had left. She had a beautiful tan. She was much more independent. She knew what she wanted to do. And I always think Sophie's independent to start with, but she had a real direction. She was much more self-sufficient. She could pretty much tackle anything that she felt inclined to and would be successful. And she's always been, but I think being away from the family and being with a group of unknown students and unknown leaders, she had to basically figure that out. And it gave her confidence. And she stayed in contact with a number of the students that she was on the trip with. And there was a great variety on the trip. And so she heard about, how different kids are where they are in the world and what they do and what's fun to them and what actually brought them all together. And from that, she, her teachers in school said, her science teacher in particular, said that he knew that she was excited about going. But when he ran into her the year after, he was amazed at how excited she was. And unfortunately, she and I have not had a chance to dive yet due to everything that's been going on. But what really encouraged her at a point to do this. We were on a trip to Hawaii, and she did snuba, where you have the hose leading up to a tank up on the raft, and I was diving, and she wanted freedom from that tether. And Sophie enjoys her freedom, and the dive gave her the freedom, and to actually skip her a catamaran, to have to keep it clean, you know, to cook for a group and to market for a group. And that was a lot of fun. And I think she accomplished everything she set out to do, and she accomplished more than I'd ever hoped she would do.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Charlene, I know Perry Ann has been on quite a few adventures. How have you seen her grow, you know, from that first summer to now?
I think the independence was a big factor. I have a tendency to do more for her than I probably should. And so it forced her to take the reins, think on her own, actually read the signs in the airport, follow directions. So like Michelle's kids, she flew unaccompanied minor for a few years, which I liked because there was somebody directing her. So the first year she was on her own, I was a nervous wreck. But she did fine. And, you know, as a freshman in college this year, I think those skills and tools she learned really helped her go off on her own. But back to, you know, what Tom said as well about not just the culture of her fellow students that are from around the country, but the different cultures that she learned in the different countries that she went to was pretty cool too.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing. And Michelle, how have you seen Amelie and Elliot grow post-program? You could even start from that first summer or any of the other summers.
Yeah, so I guess the first summer, you know, this was supposed to be a one year thing for us, by the way. This is year 7, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, whatever. So they enjoyed scuba diving before going, and we had been to all-inclusive resorts where there was some scuba diving because the kids, we have 2 other kids. Anyway, it's a long story, but the kids had always wanted to scuba dive in clear, warm water. That was their thing, because of course, when you get certified in Quebec, the water's kind of cold. But when they came back, so that first trip really solidified for them. Oh my God, I love diving. So today Elliot's 20, Emily's 22, almost. She'll be 22 next month. But Elliot's happiest place on earth is underwater. I mean, he couldn't be happier than he is there. And it was after, I think what happens is when you dive so much on these trips, all of the routine of, you know, checking your regulator and doing all of the safety checks and the buddy checks and all of that, it just becomes second nature. Whereas until you've had a long trip like that, it's still something you have to remember. Okay, what do I have to do next? Oh, I have to do this, and then I have to do that. It's like a mental checklist. This way, it just becomes second nature. So for them, the first year was probably the biggest change. Just a heads up too for parents who have themselves never been, you know, away out of a city where you're wearing the same clothes all day. You're stripped down with all of the other people that are there, right? Everybody just wears the same t-shirt every day and the same bathing suit. And there's no distinction of, you know, do you have a lot of money? Do you not have a lot of money? Do you have the cool accessory? I mean, everybody's the same. The culture shock of coming back to a city is huge. And I knew that because I had done that. I used to go on 5-week canoe trips and I'd come home and I'd be completely culture shocked. It would take me weeks to get back in. So that's exactly what happened to our kids. And luckily they were traveling together when they came home, but they didn't say a word. You know, they didn't say a word. They were sullen. And of course they had read those postcards that they had written to each other on the plane. So they just bawled their eyes out the whole way home. With, I think there was somebody else, at least on part of the trip, who was also bawling. And I remember Amelie went to sit with her and cried with her. And I mean, it was just, so the first days when they get back, it's really hard. And our family's always been the same, which is everything revolves around food. So when we meet them at the airport, we always have, you know, for Amelie, it's a baguette with some cheese. For Elliot, it's brownies. For, you know, each one of our kids has their own food. So all these other families are there with flowers and balloons, and we got a bag of groceries, you know?
Yes.
So the short term is really hard as a parent because you know they've had a good time. You want to hear all about it, but you have to give them that space. And we were lucky that the two of them sort of lived through that together. And although they were on different boats, they had seen each other once a week. And so they knew the other kids on each other's boats. And then the very first thing that I did was I had to change their phone plans to have unlimited texting internationally. Because, you know, they're texting with their new friends. We didn't do the voice thing. They you know, that texting was enough.
Uh-huh.
But, you know, in 2015, having unlimited international texting was very expensive. If we didn't have that, it would have been difficult. But Elliot had always wanted to be an engineer, and he's now studying marine biology.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
Because of his summers, primarily his summers at Broadreach, and then one Christmas we went to see my sister in Africa, and Patrick had said, "Hey, there are some really cool places on Lake Malawi," because I said we were going to Lake Malawi and they were going to dive. And he said, "Well, there's some really cool research projects there." And Elliot had a month off at Christmas, so we found one, and Elliot spent 2 weeks living with the locals and doing a research project on the fish in Lake Malawi, and using all the skills he had learned at Broadreach. He was only 17, and they don't usually take volunteers before they're 18. But because he was already a rescue diver, because he had done fish studies in 3 different oceans with Broadreach, they were like, "Absolutely, come on board. You know, we need your help."
Well, that's fantastic.
And it's been life-changing for him. And Amelie, well, you know, she's now a Broadreach instructor. So yeah, fun for her too.
That has been a growth story, if there ever was one. That's fantastic. Yeah, and can certainly appreciate that culture shock getting back. Maybe have some comfort food ready for all the parents out there that are listening. And I'll just clarify the record. We do let them change different bathing suits. They can wear different clothes, but can certainly understand that when they do come together, right, all those things that they're used to at home have kind of dissolved away, and everyone is kind of becomes the same. They become one family, which is really unique. And a lot of what we try to do at the end of each program is have a very distinct period of our programmatic be called transference. So really kind of absorbing what those students have done. And as Michelle alluded to, those airplane cards, writing notes to each other, and then hopefully carrying on those friendships and those lessons for many, many years. So thank you for sharing that. So we're kind of reaching the end here, and then we'll eventually have turned it over to some questions for the rest of the crowd out there. But last thing for our panelists. So Charlene, you have got the attention of all those other parents out there. What would you say to them if they're thinking of sending their son or daughter on Broadreach, or they've signed up and this is the summer that they're going out there? What would you say to them?
I would just short and sweet. It is the best investment you'll ever make in your child.
Well, there you go, folks. Tom, you got a lot of people out there, a lot of parents listening, hanging on your every word. What are you going to tell them?
Turn them loose. They're going to be in good hands, and they'll learn a ton.
All right, turn them loose. I like it. Maybe that'll be our slogan next year. Michelle, you've got the audience.
It's exactly the same. I mean, you never know what your child is going to want to do after, and this was a springboard for our kids. So it really launched them into what they wanted to do, and they've figured out what they wanted to do. Huge surprise for us. We thought this was just be recreation, but you know, they're both professional scuba divers now. So it's in French, we say attache ta tuque, which means like tie your hat on, because your kids are going to take you for a ride after they've spent a summer with Broadreach, and you won't regret it at all.
That'll be we've got some good slogans that have come out of this from all 3 of you. I love it. Thank you so much. I know Virginia's been over there answering some questions, but also I've seen some really great questions come through from our audience. So Virginia, I'll turn it over to you, and feel free to fire away with any questions for our panelists.
Yeah, thanks for sending great questions over. I've been doing my best to answer the Broadreach instructory ones that Broadreach HQ has the better answers to, but there's some awesome ones for our parents here. So I'm just going to kind of go in order, and if you feel like you have some good insight, I'd love to hear from y'all. One is it better to wait until high school to attend? What ages were your children when they first started attending Broadreach? What's the best age to start this adventure, in your opinion?
My daughter was 15 on her first trip. She would have been 16 on her second, and she'll be 17 now. So she was going into her sophomore year of high school, and it was perfect. Like Michelle said, they're curious, they want to know, they want to explore, and this was a great way to do it in a safe environment.
Yeah, so my kids were 14 and had just turned 16, and the timing was perfect. And we waited, like we waited 4 years because we wanted them to go the same summer, and we waited till Elliot was 14. So yeah, that's how. I don't think there's necessarily an age, but our kids started pretty young.
Perry was 16.
Got the full range. So Broadreach is open for middle schoolers through high schoolers, and then we do have a few of those college programs too for those of y'all that are new. So it just depends on the student is what it sounds like.
And we'll often get some requests for adult programs. A lot of parents want to go. Reach out to me personally. We can put something together after the summer. We'll show you where your students went.
Yeah, there you go. Post trip for the parents. This one's pretty open-ended. What are 2 or 3 things that you would make sure a student is prepared for before they get to Broadreach?
I think for me, it depends on what trip they're on, but if they're on a liveaboard trip, I think respecting the others and respecting the personal space. There's a lot of safety when you're on these boats, and it's really hard to get away from people if you need a little bit of time. And so I think that would be one. But if you're on a land-based trip, then that's not as much of an issue. But I think that's one of the hard parts, is getting used to living in a community like that.
From a boat trip, I would agree with Michelle, especially, there's very little space for privacy, so to speak, and also maintaining your personal gear that you brought with you, keeping that all organized and together so it doesn't wind up all over the boat. Oh yeah, and learn how to take short showers.
Yeah, short showers are key. Actually, there's a good question that goes along with what Michelle and Tom both said, is that a lot of families are hoping that their children can grow from this experience, sometimes in those skills. So do you feel like this is the kind of environment where someone can improve their teamwork and cooperation skills?
You don't have any choice.
Yeah, you have to.
You are with, 15, 16 other people on catamaran, or if you're on a land-based trip, you're with a group and you have to stay together and be a cooperative group. But, I can only go back to the boat trip because that's what Sophie did on her first one. But the fact that, you are part of the sailing crew, you're part of the cooking crew, you're part of the adventure crew, there's a lot to do, and you have to really integrate yourself with everyone who's on the boat with you.
Yeah, I was.
Their survival.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Michelle. Their survival depends on it.
And I would say that will probably learn how to cook if they're on a liveaboard. I mean, kids, the first thing they did, they were on a liveaboard, and Elliot, the first year, there was one boy from India, I think, who was in the kitchen even when it wasn't his duty, because he loved to cook and he used all kinds of spices. And Elliot learned a ton, and he came home, and now both of our kids are fantastic cooks. And the first time really that they cooked was on the boats at Broadreach. And then when they went on the Bali trip, they thought that it was so luxurious because they didn't have to cook.
Great. I have more questions coming in. Those are great. And I'll touch on that too, that even if your student is not on a boat trip, they also learn how to cook in Curacao. They have a kitchen there. And if they are on one of our non-diving programs, they might not be cooking as much, but they as leaders still are responsible for finding a menu and a restaurant and placing orders and calling those restaurants to get those reservations set, making sure that the small like ticos can take care of a group of 15 people. So those responsibility and group dynamics still come into play no matter where we send you. What is one thing that you all might change about your experience with Broadreach?
I wish we'd done it sooner.
I know one thing I would change, and I made this trip. I don't think it'll be as noticeable. I would throw a car freshener in her bag and tell her to on the trip home. And that way when you open it, you aren't as shocked.
These are good points.
True.
These are very good points.
Yeah,
Nice.
I wouldn't change anything. I mean, we started, well, there's one thing I would change. Elliot really wanted to do shark studies, and it never fit in with his schedule and his hockey, and he was scheduled to do it last summer. So that's the one big disappointment. But it really was out of our control. So
Yeah. What else? Do you feel like you've had enough contact with your children during their programs? What is the schedule that Broadreach sets up for contact home, so that you can expect a phone call home or not? What does that look like from the parent perspective?
I think we might, I was just to say, I think we might be unusual because we didn't expect any contact. So whatever phone calls we got were just a bonus, and you never really know exactly what day it's going to come in. You think and I think it ended up being often on Saturdays or something, but yeah, for us, it was just a bonus. There was no expectation. We really wanted our kids to unplug from us as well.
Same with us. We would see the daily trip updates that were posted by Broadreach, which was more than enough for us because every child was in every update. I got to know, like Michelle did, who my daughter was crewing with. So I knew kind of who was writing and who was in the pictures. And I did want her to be independent of us. And at this age, and even now, Sophie wants to be independent of us. And what better way can we do it than to place them in a place where we have trust?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Still have lots of questions coming in. I have seen some about COVID, and I just wanted to let any families that are listening out there know that our protocols are listed online under our frequently asked questions section. So I'm going to direct those families there for now. And then if you have specific questions, to give us a call. Patrick and I will share the phone number and email address at the end, just so that we can kind of keep going with when we have our parents here. Any concerns that you had mixing boys and girls in small space as a parent? And how did Broadreach handle that for you?
The funniest story I heard from Sophie was about the head on one of the catamarans was malfunctioning. So they had to share for a couple of days between the boys and the girls. And she said it was just like having my brother around. He was always in there when I wanted to go.
It's that family atmosphere, right?
Yeah, so I had no concerns at all. And I understand, from the kids when they got back from that first trip, that Broadreach has really strict rules. And I think we get a copy of the rules before the kids leave, don't we, about the do's and don'ts. So I think it's very clearly laid out. The expectations are very clear. So it was never an issue for either our son or our daughter.
Great to hear it. A big concern often for our families is having their children fly alone for the first time. Any advice for a parent putting a kid on the plane by themselves for the first time, or anything those students should know as they navigate the airport?
one thing that my daughter did that I had never thought of, she went to the websites. I think she only crossed through Miami on this last trip, but she went to the website of the airport and did a YouTube looking at the airport just to see what she might see, what the signs might look like. So she knew from one airline to another where she was going. Now this time she's going to be transiting slightly differently and returning to us somewhere else, but she gained a great deal of confidence in that trip. And we travel a good deal, so she knows about airports and what to watch for and stuff. So I would say it was just, she did her research to know what she was looking for.
Kids are so resourceful. Things that like just didn't exist. There's also maps of the airports online. They can figure out where they're going to eat lunch on their layover. It's it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
What a good idea.
One of the things that we did, particularly when they're going to Bali, because it's such a long trip with so many connections, is our kids travel really very self-sufficiently. So with their own snacks, with lots of like Cliff Bars. And because our kids are athletes, they're always hungry anyway. So they know what kind of snacks they like. But they both get hangry. So they knew that, schlepping snacks around was a really good idea. And somebody recently gave me the idea of bringing instant oatmeal on a plane, because you can always get boiling water. And so I traveled to Australia last year with instant oatmeal. And when I went through security in the US, they were shaking it and they're like, what is this? We can hear something in the bag. And I was like, it's oatmeal.
There you go.
They let me take it. But little things like that really help. And then having, whatever kind of travel pillow or whatever thing makes them comfortable. And then usually now the Wi-Fi in the airports is pretty good. And our kids at the time didn't have data on their phones, so they only used the airport Wi-Fi. So I just made sure that when I knew that they were in the airport, that we were near Wi-Fi in case they had any questions. So we just made sure that we were available. The other thing we did, and I don't know how it works in the US, but in Canada, a child can have a credit card on the parent's account. I thought it was at the age of 16. It turns out it's the age of 14. So the very first time they went away, so when they were 16 and 14, they actually traveled on their own. But Amity had a credit card with enough of a limit to buy 2 plane tickets home. So, just in case. And of course, not allowed cash advances, like you can do that. You can only.
Yeah, got to protect yourself too.
So that was really, for us, that was reassuring, knowing that they had a credit card. And then the following year they were going their own separate ways. So they each had their cards, and yeah, that reassured us.
To tag onto that too, Broadreach is on call 24/7 as soon as there's trips in the field. So if for some reason your student can't get a hold of you, they can get a hold of us and we can communicate. We often have travel day communication with families and students. So just know that we're there as well. And we'll give you a nice little piece of paper to print off so they know how to get through customs and know how to get in touch with us and stuff too. I'm gonna.
I think we've got about 10 minutes left, just that final warning. So maybe time for a couple more questions, and then I know our parents are busy and they've got things to do, so we'll cut them loose. I think that's the slogan, right? Cut them loose.
Cut them loose.
I think we've got time for a couple more, Virginia.
Yeah, I'm going to go with 2 more. And so for any parents out there that have lingering questions, we, again, will share an email address, send them our way, and we'll either grab some parent perspective or respond the best that we can. But how about moms and dads? If your child expresses hesitation about, I'm going to say any challenges, this parent specifically said diving challenges, but it can really be anything on program. They're hoping that Broadreach has creative ways to help their teens go for their best chance of growth and experience adventure. So we'd love to hear your experiences about students taking challenge head on Broadreach.
My daughter was thrilled to be underwater. She was not thrilled to hike. And hiking has nothing she's enjoyed, although the rest of the family does. But it's team effort. Everybody participates, and you go at the speed of the slowest person. You know, whether it's a dive or whether it's your hike. And everybody is very understanding of what you're doing or what you're involved in. And they want you as part of the team, whether you're the head or you're the tail, it doesn't matter. You're still part of the team.
Yeah, and I can tell you, as the mother of an instructor, that the instructors are trained in how to help the kids, whether it's because they have diving anxiety or if it's, you know, something else or difficulty integrating into the group. They've got all kinds of tips and tricks and so many games that make it fun, and the glums and glows at the end of every day. I mean, everybody has a chance at the end of every day to say, this was not great in my day, and this was great in my day. So I think that really, really helps everybody, like Tom said, feel like they're part of the group.
Awesome. The last lingering question I have here from our parents to answer live tonight are if your students ever had any speed bumps they had to get over, transitions fitting in with the group, dealing with homesickness, some of those lingering worries that our parents have because they haven't seen their children in these environments before. Can you speak to your students' experience with that, or maybe yours, worrying about your student being so far away?
Yeah, our kids had no issues, so I can't speak to that. And we were, you know, although we missed them, we were thrilled not to hear from them. And again, I'm coming back to the trip updates, right? The trip updates really made us, and you can copy family and friends. So my parents, their friends, like everybody was like, "Ooh, we got a trip update." And then even when we saw our family on the weekends, everybody would be talking about what they had done on the trip. So it gets everybody involved, and I think it reassures us a lot about what's going on.
I was probably most worried about the dive aspects of it, and you know how the instruction would go. Would she listen to the instructors, you know, and do all the right things? But as Michelle said, you know, the instructors are super well trained, and I think no matter what speed bump would occur, they've been already analyzed, already trained. They know what's going to happen to somebody, and at some point in the summer, it will happen. And when it does, it's just they pull that tool out of their box and they're like, okay, we know what to do now.
On that note, the staff are also trained as wilderness first responders. So they can use pretty much anything that's on hand to, you know, fix any kind of medical problem. I mean, unless of course, you know, they need medication and stuff, but anything that's, you know, a sprain or whatever, they're really well trained.
Yeah, I mean, our concern was when Perry got dehydrated and had to go to the hospital. You know, I was just thinking, oh gosh, I don't want her to have to come home. And so I would say that the staff did everything to keep her on trip.
I love that we're able to answer that question and kind of start wrapping up tonight by talking about how awesome our instructors are. They are everything. And Patrick and I are like giddy talking about training because training is the most fun thing. We basically take our Broadreach instructors on a Broadreach program, and instead of learning to dive or some other skill, they learn how to be Broadreach instructors many times for the 4th year in a row. So we're very excited, and they are, as these parents have said, well trained.
Very much so. And I certainly want to say thank you not only to our audience out there for sticking in there with us and hanging out and asking such great questions, but also our panelists. Thank you all so much for being here. We realize there are a lot of relationships in a Broadreach program, our students' relationships to each other, our staff's relationships to those students, but parents, y'all are one of the biggest parts of what we do in terms of stakeholders for our summers, and it really means the world to us. So keep asking these questions. Happy to make connections to other families as well, and certainly reach out to us here at Broadreach HQ. I know Virginia's going to put our contact information there in the chat, but you know our number, 919-256-8200. So feel free to call us anytime. And then, as Virginia said, 24/7 throughout the summer. And so again, big thank you, Michelle, Tom, Charlene. It has been an absolute pleasure, and we'll see you this summer.
Yeah.
Look forward to it.
Great.
Yeah, look forward to it. You're welcome.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
Give our best to everybody.